Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of Everyday CX-ISM. Not to be confused with the amazing book by Laura Bates, Everyday Sexism. No. This is Everyday CX-ISM, the philosophy of customer experience being made into a movement you lead rather than just a strategy on a page. And let's wind it back a second. If you're not familiar with me, my name is Katie Stabler, and I'm the founder of Cultivate, a global and award-winning customer experience agency. You might have got it from the name, but we partner with organizations to help them understand and improve and prioritize their customer experience. Now, unsurprisingly, as a customer experience professional, my daily inbox, LinkedIn, my webinar content, the things that are pushed into my inbox every day are heavily customer experience focused. And there is honestly no end of amazing customer experience content out there. However, a lot of what I'm seeing at the moment is high level strategy, how to implement and design frameworks, customer journey mapping frameworks, customer vision frameworks, mission statement frameworks, lots and lots about transformation, lots about technology, and of course, we cannot get away from the conversation of AI. And fair enough, all of these things are valuable. All of these things have a place. And of course, we cannot really get away from the world of AI, because if we're not on that journey of adoption, then we may well be missing out. However, in this hugely digital technology, AI focused world where we are actually talking about the human more and more, but at risk of losing the human element more and more, I wanted to create this little corner of our CX world where we are focusing on the end outcome, the customer experience, the human experience, the lived reality that each and every one of us has day in and day out. Because if you've ever shopped anywhere, I don't know if you're noticing, but things aren't really as awesome as maybe they should be with all of this pretty new jazzy tech. So, Everyday CXism is going to focus on our reality. We're going to bring up that high-level conversation and bring it right down to the end customer impact. So what can you expect if you stick around? Real lived experience. Yeah, I'm going to share my experiences. I'm going to share your experiences. And we are going to dig into each and every one of them to understand what might be happening in the background of the organization for that experience to have come to life, good or bad. Maybe we'll sprinkle in a little bit of customer psychology. Maybe we'll touch upon the neuroscience of what's going on. We are definitely going to speak about organizational behavior, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot on culture. But ultimately, the aim is just to get us all thinking and keep us focused on that end experience, and maybe just have some ideas and inspiration or just simple thought provocation around what we could maybe do differently in each of our own little CX worlds. So, to that point, let me get us started with a recent experience I had with Manchester Airport. Now, actually, this experience, it got me musing on the question, can the threat of a bad experience create a good experience? And spoiler alert, yes, it can. What happened is I was at the point of Manchester security when you're taking all the stuff out of your pockets, chucking them in the grey trays and about to go through those new body scanners. And the gent who was herding us through said in all seriousness, please make sure everything is out of your pockets. If we find anything in your pockets, you will be sent to Ryanair. Oh, come on, that is funny. That's funny. And do you know what? Myself, the people around me kind of heard it unexpectedly and then obviously all giggled and laughed. Now, when I think about the entire experience, and I have to really think about it to remember it all, actually, at the point where your bag is coming through the conveyor and you're hoping that it doesn't get pulled off to be searched, mine did. So I had to wait in a longer queue whilst they were being searched. And then when my bag got to its turn for being searched, the lady looked on the little scanning screen and said, there's actually no obvious reason as to why it's been stopped. So I'm not going to search it. I'll put it back through the scanner. And if it gets stopped again, shortcut the queue. Okay, so that's good and bad, but a bit frustrating that I just waited there for 15 minutes. And it went back through, it didn't get stopped, and off I went. Now, the fact that I had to wait, and unnecessarily so it seemed, that actually isn't the thing that stands out in that experience. In fact, I had to dig deep to recall that. What stands out in that experience is that positive, super simple, almost split second of a moment where that gentleman injected his own personality and humour into what at best is a laborious process to go through, and at worst is a stressful experience to go through. And this is the genius here of this customer experience, because it reminds us of what customer experience actually is, the depth that goes into CX, which I think so few organizations fail to take into account. So let me just explain. Customer experience is the interaction that every customer has with a brand, right? Yes, but that interaction creates an emotion. Now, that emotion might be so mild and insignificant that we barely remember it, or it might be so huge and impactful that we most certainly do. And when I say huge and impactful, I'm talking about the world of customer experience, so let's keep it in context. But it could be frustrating, annoying, it could be humorous or surprising. And those emotions are what create memory. The stronger the emotion, the more intense the emotion, the stronger the memory. And as we continue to have interactions with the brand, those emotions continue to create memories, and those memories grow into what is our perception of that brand. And hey, guess what? That perception is customer experience. So let me just summarize that again. Interactions create emotion, emotion creates memory, memory creates perception, perception creates customer experience. And in this case, that emotion was surprise, wasn't expecting a joke from the security guy, humor, and therefore I've got this good, lasting customer experience. Now, this isn't just my ramblings. This also comes from the Nobel Prize winning, no less, Daniel Kahneman and his research onto customer experience. And specifically, I'm talking about the peak end rule. Now, this is not in isolation to customer experience. It's connected to experience in general. But it is that notion that we remember from an experience the moment that is most intense, the peak. So again, those surprise and joy moments, or those disappointing, frustrating or upsetting moments. And then the end of the experience, which is connected to recency theory, the idea that the thing that happened most recently is the thing that we remember most prominently. And those companies that embrace this kind of principle of the peak end rule are the companies that lead the way in customer experience design. They know this matters. They know what creates good customer experience. And therefore, their experience design is intentional and not accidental. Now, if you just think about what are the current moments that exist in your customer experience that, intentionally or not, create these intense moments? Where do your customers get a little bit surprised? Where is there a moment of unexpected joy or happiness? Where are those possible areas of frustration or annoyance or even anger? What creates these intense emotions that create memory, that create perception, and that build up what your customer calls customer experience? And more importantly, are you designing these in? If you're not, can you? Why not? Another thing on the conversation of Manchester Airport that I'd like to share is after I'd tootled through security and continued probably to giggle at that man's little point of humour, or as most people call it, a joke, I went through Terminal 2, by the way, which is really cool. If you haven't been through, the redesign is great. And I went to I think it was the Escape Lounge. I hadn't been before. I got set up with my laptop and I went to grab a glass of wine. Yes, it was an evening flight, so a glass of wine is fine, don't judge. And I had my glass of wine, I had some food, I had a second glass of wine, I was working along quite merrily, and I had about 40 minutes left, and I thought to myself, well, why not? Let's have that third glass of wine. But I looked over and the queue was huge and the airport lounge was really busy. And I just thought I'd bite the bullet and just go because there's going to be a queue no matter what. I kid you not, that queue went down inhumanly quick. I mean, the gentleman serving was super effective. And after my second glass of wine, I was probably quite conversationally lubricated. So I thought I'd give this gentleman a compliment. And I told him how impressed I was at his speed of service. And talk about speed, like a gunslinger in the Wild West, he whipped out a card with a QR code on and asked me to give my feedback more formally. So I went and sat down and I had a little chuckle to myself, and maybe, the average Joe who doesn't care so much about operational CX wouldn't have noticed this, but straight away I did. And I thought to myself, I'd been to him twice before. He had not given me a card to give feedback previously. However, seeing that I was a definite promoter and I had given him great feedback, he took advantage of that moment and thought, yes, let's capture this and formalize it. Now, either he just loves getting feedback and he's so up for it that he's ready to hand out these cards as and when he spots the opportunity, or more likely, there is a process going on in the background where employees are trained that when they hear good feedback or they see particularly happy customers, they ask for that feedback. Now, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this whole process. There's definitely some confirmation bias going on there, right? Regardless. I actually have participated in this kind of behavior before. Now, I cut my teeth in the world of customer experience working for Europe's second largest debt collection company. Now, if you're familiar with the world of debt collection, there is so much stigma and fear attached to it. It's a very difficult industry. And as a customer, it's obviously a very difficult position to be in. Financial vulnerability is very real and I think growing in the economy that we're in. If you are a customer to get a letter from a debt collector, particularly if it's your first time, then the first thing you're probably going to do is go online to find out, are they reputable? What are they like to deal with? And just figure out what your next steps are. Now, if you're faced online with a litany of potentially scary commentary from other people, then of course you're going to be very unlikely to make contact with that company. And the thing is, even if you have a good experience with a debt collecting company, you're probably unlikely to talk about it. So, of course, the conversation online about any kind of debt collection tends to lean into the negative. So, we wanted to change that as an industry. We wanted to grow a more positive reputation. And whether you believe it or not, we actually used to get lots of great customer feedback directly to agents. And the reason you do that is because certain customers, they would build up the fear of contacting, they would become nervous or scared at the point that when they finally made contact and realized it's just another human on the other end of the phone and actually very willing to help and support to put a plan in place that works for all parties, they would be relieved. They'd be so relieved, and that would lead to great feedback. So we thought, let's harness it. And we had a pilot where we would ask our agents, when our customers give positive feedback, much like in the airport, we would ask our customers to go online on Trustpilot and leave a positive review. And it worked. They did. It was amazing. So definitely a level of confirmation bias there, but hopefully, and certainly in my opinion, for the greater good. So I'm curious as to what you think about a potential process like this. I mean, for me, giving a customer a QR code in the moment of feedback is great because if, like me, they scan it and give the feedback straight away, it's authentic, it's sincere, it's real time, and it's remembered correctly. Of course, it's good for brand perception because if you're pushing all of these promoters to leave their feedback, they're giving it to you anyway. Just why not share it with the wider world? That's great. I also think it's good for employee satisfaction as well because you are showing how important customer feedback is, and you're encouraging people when it's given to them to capture it and share it more widely. So tick, tick, tick. I think obviously where it's questionable is that there is a huge risk that the data is going to be skewed. You're only seeing, or you're more likely to see increased levels of positive feedback. Doubt very much that that same gentleman was handing out QR codes to disgruntled, unhappy flyers. It can also trivialize feedback. And whilst I think it has some benefits to employee satisfaction, there's also the potential that it goes the other way around and actually devalues what your employees' views are of it. Because again, if you're only promoting the positive internally, your team will know that that's a biased view. And just because your customers who are potentially detractors are not being asked to give their feedback proactively, of course, they still may do so. And if they don't, it's kind of almost worse, because then the negative experiences go unviewed and therefore unacted on. And overall, if you're creating this data bias, not only is it potentially creating behavior that isn't ideal in an organization, it also is skewing your data from a decision-making perspective. So you might be missing opportunities for improvement because you're pushing the positives. Hey, I'm sure we could talk about this all day, but I would be really curious to hear your thoughts. Ultimately, if a process like that is taking place, there is some confirmation bias that you need to consider. Disclaimer, these experiences did happen to me, but of course I cannot be certain about what is happening operationally or internally to create these experiences. Regardless, my time at Manchester Airport was a very good one, so kudos to Manchester Airport. Always happy to fly through you. So I did promise, short and sweet. I hope episode 1 has given you a taster of what's to come from this podcast, keeping it human-centered, keeping it impact-focused, and hopefully having conversations that can support your actions, whatever they may be, internally. If you'd like to stay tuned, please like, subscribe, and share. And as always, happy CXing.